Hello, everybody. This is our social studies work for the day. Um, since nobody's really doing any of the social studies work that I assign, I have decided just to do it this way, and you either get credit or you don't get credit. You're going to open up your social studies workbooks to page 42, and you're going to follow along with me and work through it and answer the questions as we go along. Let me make sure that's good. Yep. So page 42, it says explorers and settlers. Explorers and settlers depended on waterways to travel. These waterways were often challenging. It was not easy to live in Europe in the 1500s and 1600s. There was not enough land. There were not enough jobs. Wars were frequent. Some people were treated badly because of their beliefs. Most people saw no way to improve their lives in Europe. But North America offered a hope and chance for a new life. We live in North America currently. Europeans arrive. Europeans came to North America with varying goals. Some wanted to get rich and return to Europe. Some wanted to build new lives in the new land. The Spanish arrived first, landing in the southern part of North America. They named Florida and claimed it for Spain in 1513. A few years later, they claimed Mexico for Spain. The Spanish continued to claim land through the 1500s and 1600s. You can see settlers arriving in Jamestown, Virginia. So on all these pages, guys, you're going to have stuff that you need to answer, and you're going to be taking pictures of the pages with questions and submitting them to this activity for credit. So it says, look at the picture on the left. That's going to be on page 43. You're looking at the people in the canoe. Write why waterways would be challenging for explorers and settlers. You're going to get credit for one sentence in there. So write in your book why waterways could be challenging to explorers and settlers. Other European groups soon followed the Spanish. The British settled Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Then another group of British colonists called Pilgrims founded the Plymouth colony in Massachusetts in 1620. A colony is a settlement in a new land where the people remain loyal to their home country. Colonists are people who settle a colony. By 1608, the French settled in Canada, which was then called New France. The French settled there for financial reasons. They also wanted to increase the land they controlled. French explorers such as La Salle, whom you read about at the beginning of the chapter, began to explore more of North America. La Salle traveled from New France across the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi River. In 1682, he claimed the entire region on either side of the Mississippi River for France. That area included Indiana. It was a region of many rivers, dense forests, and rich farmland. It seemed a perfect place to travel, hunt, or settle. You need to look at the map and circle natural features that La Salle encountered during his travels. Why might these features have been challenging? So look at this map, and then you are to figure out what are the natural features that he encountered. Look at up here. What are these? What are these things he traveled on? Those are natural features. Why would it have been challenging? Page 44. The French in Indiana. During the 1700s, Indiana was part of the Louisiana Territory, which France claimed. A territory is an area of land that is controlled by an outside government. Soon after the territory was claimed, French people began moving into the region. They mostly traveled by water since there were no roads. Trails could be long and difficult to follow. They began to settle along the rivers and lakes of the frontier. Most of the French who came to Indiana were trappers and traders. Trappers were people who caught animals for their fur. There were also soldiers who were there to protect French claims in the region. The French built forts along the rivers. Forts were used for protection and also for trading posts. A fort is usually fortified or strengthened to offer protection. The French built their forts near rivers since most people traveled this way. This allowed the French to see and stop people more easily. Stockades surrounded some forts. A stockade is a defensive wall or fence built around a fort, usually made of wooden posts. In 1717, the French built Fort Ouiatonnon by the Wabash River near present-day Lafayette, Indiana. Such forts were needed because not all Native Americans were friendly. Also, some Native Americans were allies of the British. An ally is a partner or supporter who pledges friendship or help. Because the French and British were enemies at this time, an ally of the British would be an enemy of the French. French forts and trading posts were supplied by the Voyagers. Voyagers were Frenchmen from New France who traveled the rivers of the huge territory in large canoes. They brought trade goods from New France to people on the frontier. So down here, if you look at this picture, people they recreate historic events at that fort. We would take a great field trip if you guys were in school to Gathering of Five Medals and see something like that. So number 2 here, right, says the main waterways that helped the French travel through French territory in Indiana. Look over here. The red line shows the French trade route. It says write the main waterways. What were the main waterways they traveled to get through there? Page 45, trappers and traders. French trappers and traders who came to Indiana faced many challenges. There were no maps for the dense forests that covered the territory. The forests were full of dangerous wild animals. However, many of those animals had fine fur. There were bears, wolves, badgers, foxes, raccoons, beavers, and more. The fur of these animals helped people dress warmly in the winter. They were important to both Native Americans and Europeans. French traders got furs from both French trappers and Native American trappers. The British also began to trade with Native Americans for furs. The British had more goods that were usually cheaper and of higher quality than what the French traders brought to trade. Many Native Americans remained allies of the French. However, many others liked British goods and wanted to trade with them. They signed treaties with the British. This made the French unhappy because it threatened their control of the fur trade. Then it says, number 3, list 2 challenges the French trappers and traders faced in Indiana. So what challenges did the French trappers face? You can find the answer in that first paragraph up there, guys. Page 46, growing conflict. Conflict was not new to the territory. The Iroquois Confederacy was a longtime enemy of many less powerful Native American groups. A confederacy is a group of people or several smaller groups joined together for a common purpose. Iroquois warriors had fought the Shawnee, Lenape, and Kickapoo people and forced them to move west. When the French became allies of these smaller groups, they automatically became enemies of the Iroquois. We read about the Shawnee and the Lenape. As a result, the Iroquois led major attacks against the French in Canada in the 1600s. The fact that the British were enemies of France made the Iroquois allies of the British. The Iroquois also traded with the British. They became dependent on British goods. The British traded with other Native American groups as well. They traded with the Miami, who had once traded with the French. The Miami got along with the British and liked their trade goods. By 1747, the Shawnee and Delaware were also trading with the British. The French saw their control of the fur trade slipping away. They attacked the British in Miami in 1752, and they won. The Potawatomi, which you learned were a powerful group, remained allies of the French. They had traded with the French for a long time. The French built more forts, hoping to regain control of their territory. Settlers from Britain and other countries began to move westward into the Ohio River Valley. The French considered this their territory. In 1754, the conflict turned into a war. This war became known as the French and Indian War. Now he has to summarize here, guys. Write good sentences. Why Native Americans chose sides in the French and Indian War. Why did they choose sides? You should start your sentence off. The Native Americans chose sides because. Page 47, and it's the last page that I'll be reading of this. It's the last page of this lesson. At first, it looked as though the French would win the war. The Potawatomi and French together won many victories during the first 4 years of the war. However, things began to change by the end of 1757. The French were running out of money and supplies. Some of the British joined their Native American allies to fight against the French and their allies. The French were also greatly outnumbered. The French and Indian War lasted for 9 years. It ended in 1763, and the British had won. The British took control of French territories in Canada and all the French land east of the Mississippi River, including Indiana. And if we look at the caption here underneath this picture, the French met with their Native American allies during the French and Indian War. Okay, then 5 and 6. So number 5 says summarize. Write why the French built forts near the rivers. You can find that in the chapter. Both waterways and forests offered challenges to the early settlers. How did they also offer opportunities? So, both waterways and forests offered challenges. Why were the waterways and forests challenging? But also, what were the opportunities that those provided? And then fill out stop, pause, and go. Here, stop, I need help with. Wait, I have a question about. And now I know. All right, take pictures of the pages with questions and upload them to this activity for full credit, guys. I'll be grading them and all your responses.